So I'd like to welcome everyone here today. My name is Jana Nethercott, and I'm the clerk for the Municipality of West Elgin. We have two representatives from the Ministry of the Municipal Affairs and Housing. We're going to give a presentation on the candidates for running for municipal council. So I'm just about to start the presentation now.
Thank you. So hello, my name is Caitlin Reddick. Attending along with me from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing is Jennifer. And I would like to thank West Elgin, Dutton Dunwich, and Southwold for inviting us and hosting for this candidate and third-party information session. Next slide, please. These slides are meant to be a summary of some of the sections and should not be relied on for legal or official purposes. I do want to stress that we are not lawyers and that you should always consult the legislation and seek legal advice when necessary. We will not be able to cover every aspect of the municipal election, but hope that this provides you with a better understanding of the process and legislation and improves your comfort level. Congratulations for taking an interest in your community and in local government. Whether you're interested in serving on municipal council or on a school board or registering as a third-party advertiser. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide outlines some of the topics that we want to cover during this session. The roles of elected members of council, head of council, municipal staff, as well as the role of the school board trustee, the nomination process and how a candidate withdraws a nomination. Also, what happens if a candidate files a nomination and then changes his or her mind about which office they wish to run for, some key dates, who is eligible to run for municipal office and school board and who isn't, general campaign rules and election finances, such as campaign spending limits, contribution limits, campaign expenses, borrowing, what expenses are exempt from the spending limit, surplus deficit, financial reporting at the end of the campaign period, as well as compliance audits initiated by an application, penalties, general information about the voters list, and lastly, resources where you can find information detailed on the second to last slide. Next slide, please. Running for municipal office. So you're considering running for municipal office. Local government is the level of government that is closest to the people and is the most accessible and responsive to the needs of the community. You've made a decision to throw your hat in the ring, or you're thinking about it and are curious to know how to go about it. Perhaps it's something you've always wanted to pursue, or you want to make a difference, or you are not happy with some of the decisions that have been made, or you have a passion for politics. Regardless, it's a 4-year commitment that will be filled with challenges, excitement, disappointments, hard work, and a great deal of satisfaction. Ontario's municipal governments deliver local services, while the province establishes the legislative and policy framework. The Ontario government sets standards for many local services, such as land use planning, building regulation, social housing, and the province provides funding to municipalities for delivery of some services. The ministry also works in partnership with the municipal sector to support efficient and responsive local governments that are sustainable and investment ready. Local government is a challenging environment with high expectations and limited resources, basically doing more with less. There is a limited understanding of roles of council and staff, and government is like no other business. You can't make everyone happy, so council must make difficult decisions in the best interest of the municipality. Before we get into an overview of the Municipal Elections Act, we wanted to provide a brief summary of the role of elected municipal officials and the role of staff. Please note that the information about the role of council and staff and accountability and transparency can also be found in the Counselor's Guide on the ministry's website. This guide is an excellent tool that can provide you with a lot more information about how municipalities operate and how council and staff can work together in the best interests of the municipality. Next slide, please. Thank you. Council and staff roles. First, let me start by saying that Section 2 of the Municipal Act stipulates that municipalities are created by the province to be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction, and each municipality is given powers and duties under the Municipal Act and other pieces of legislation for the purpose of providing good government. The Municipal Act is a legislative framework for municipalities, which seeks to balance the local autonomy and flexibility with accountability and transparency of municipal operations. The key to an organization, government, business, industry, or local service club is for everyone to understand their respective roles and relationships. In the next few slides, we are going to review the role of the mayor, the mayor's role as the chief executive officer, the role of council, and the role of municipal staff, which are all key to an effective and efficient local government. Next slide, please. Thank you. The role of council. It is the role of council to represent the public and to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality, to develop and evaluate the policies and programs of the municipality, and determine what services the municipality provides. For more information about the role of council, please refer to Section 224 of the Municipal Act. Next slide, please. Thank you. The role of council, this is done as a collective group, with all members each having one vote. Municipalities are created to be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction, and each municipality is given powers and duties under the Municipal Act and many other acts for the purpose of providing good government with respect to those matters. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jennifer, to continue. I guess you're sitting.
I'm at the role of council. You were supposed,
I did both of those.
okay. Oh, no, we're on the next slide. Where am I?
Yep.
Okay, so thank you, Caitlin. So the Section 225 of the Municipal Act states that it's the role of the head of council to act as the chief executive officer, preside over council meetings so that its business can be carried out efficiently and effectively, provide leadership to the council, and provide information recommendations to council on policies, practices, procedures, and ensure transparency and accountability. They represent the municipality at official functions, and they carry out the duties of the head of council under the Municipal Act or any other act. The role of the head of council is to act as a leader. The head of council is the chair of the meetings of council and the public face of the municipality. Next slide, please. As the chief executive officer of the municipality, the head of council shall uphold and promote the purposes of the municipality, promote public involvement, act as the representative and promote the municipality locally and elsewhere, participate in and foster activities that enhance the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the municipality and its residents. Although the legislation refers to the head of council as the chief executive officer of the municipality, this may be confusing to people with a business background. The head of council actually has very few powers that can be exercised independently of the rest of council, except where specifically delegated in cases of emergency or in the context of procedural matters during a council meeting. The head of council has no greater power than any other individual member of council. It is important to note that council makes decisions, not any individual council member, including the head of council. To clarify, the head of council always has a vote. There is sometimes confusion on this point in the media and with the public who think that the head of the council can only vote in the case of a tie. Another clarification regarding voting, refraining from voting counts as a no vote. This is spelled out specifically in legislation in the case of recorded votes. A tie loses, so the result is the same as having voted no. Next slide, please. The staff role. So the staff role would include implementing council's decisions and establishing administrative practices and procedures to carry out council's decisions. They undertake research and provide advice to council on policies and programs of the municipality, and they carry out duties required by legislation or other duties assigned by the municipality. A key feature of effective and efficient councils is a well-developed understanding of the council staff relations and the role of each party. The Counselor's Guide provides a list of ways that council members can assist staff to meet council's expectations. Some examples include having a policy requiring comprehensive job descriptions for all staff, providing clear policy decisions, directions, and expectations, adopting policies that complement and reinforce staff efforts, consulting with staff before deciding on policies, and being prepared for council meetings. Staff in turn should provide well-organized agendas and supporting materials, provide sufficient timely information and analysis to make council's decision-making easier, notify council of changes to legislation and programs, and provide any advice on policy, including options and recommended actions, identifying the costs and benefits for the community in human and financial terms, notifying council immediately of any unintended or unexpected impacts of policy decisions, and implementing council's decisions as effectively and professionally as possible. As you know, there are some municipal staff positions that have statutory obligations, being the clerk, the treasurer, the chief building official, and the fire chief. It is important that council not interfere with the statutory obligations of those roles. For example, the clerk and the treasurer positions have statutory duties or responsibilities assigned to them under the Municipal Act or other pieces of legislation. The Building Code Act would define statutory duties for the chief building official, and the Fire Prevention and Protection Act would define statutory duties for the fire chief. Next roll, please, or next slide, please. The role of the Chief Administrative Officer or the CAO. So a municipality may appoint a Chief Administrative Officer who shall be responsible for the exercising general control and management of the affairs of the municipality for the purpose of ensuring the efficient and effective operation of the municipality, and B, performing such other duties as assigned by the municipality. The function of the CAO within the municipality is akin to the role of a chief executive officer in a business environment. The CAO is responsible for the general control and management of the day-to-day operations of the municipality, which may include developing and implementing appropriate internal administrative practices and procedures to ensure the efficient, effective, and accountable operations of the municipality. To help us understand the role of the CAO in the municipality, we can picture an hourglass. Council is at one end and all municipal staff and department heads are at the other. The CAO is in the middle, the smallest part where the sand in the hourglass flows. So if council wants to give directions to a specific department, the communication would flow through the CAO. And likewise, if the department wants to give information or reports, etc., to council, it would flow through the CAO. Next slide, please. Staff-council relationships. So the Counselor's Guide provides some very useful information on how council and staff can work together. This slide provides you with a high-level overview of that relationship. Councils and their administration have different roles within the municipality, but their roles have common goals and purposes. In general, it is the role of the elected council to represent the community and set the direction and policy for the municipality. And it is the role of the staff to manage people and resources to achieve council's vision. Council generally sets the policy direction for the municipality, and staff provide the research and expert advice to help council in its decision-making process. Once council makes a decision, staff generally has the responsibility to implement the policy to council, for example, through administering and delivering the services and programs to the community. Staff and council rely on one another to move the municipality forward. Both staff and council provide leadership. Council provides political leadership, while the administration provides leadership to the organization. The relationship between staff and council is interconnected, and it is important for council members and staff to respect one another's roles so they can serve the public in an effective and efficient manner. Municipalities are required to adopt a policy on the relationship between members of council and municipal staff. Municipalities have the flexibility to determine the content of these policies. Next slide, please. The next few slides will provide a bit more information on each of the roles of council as described in the Counselor's Guide. So the representative role. In your role as a representative, you are elected by the constituents to represent their views when dealing with issues that come before council. However, your constituents have many views and opinions, and you cannot represent these all of the time. For many issues, you will have to consider a variety of opposing interests and make decisions that may not be popular with everyone. You should use your judgment and decide based on the best interests of the municipality as a whole. In practice, there is no single correct approach to the representative role. And on many issues, you may find that you fall somewhere between the two opposing views. To be sure to familiarize yourself with any policies or protocols that your municipality may have in place regarding the handling of complaints and citizen inquiries. Although you may want to find some way of helping, remember to consult with the municipal staff. If your municipality doesn't already have a complaint policy, council may want to consider adopting one. Furthermore, there may be circumstances where decisions are made by designated staff that operate at arm's length from the municipality, and where it could be inappropriate for elected officials to interfere or be seen as interfering. Examples would include decisions made by the fire chief, the chief building official, or the medical officer of health. A councillor who has made promises that cannot be kept may lose credibility with the citizens and strain the working relationships with the staff. As I mentioned before, each individual council member has one vote when making decisions. Every member of council should vote on matters in the best interest of the municipality as a whole. And every member should respect each other's points of view during and after debating an issue at the council table. Once a decision is made by council, it is the decision of the municipality, and staff are required to carry out and implement that decision. Next slide, please. Policy-making role. So some council decisions are routine. Others establish general principles to help guide further actions. Those are often considered policy decisions. Some policies can be specific, such as a bylaw requiring dogs to be kept on leashes in public areas, and others can be broader and more general, such as the approval of an official plan. So how is policy made? This slide outlines the general process undertaken during the policymaking role. The Counselor's Guide does provide a lot of details on the policymaking process, but I'll provide you with a high-level overview. You start by identifying the issue. As council, you agree on what the issue is and what the objectives are. Council would then direct staff to research the issue further and identify and recommend options to council. There may be the need to consult with the public to consider their feedback. Council would then review staff information and consider factors such as demands on time and implement the policy and any cost implications. Council makes a decision on the best course of action and adopts the policy. From there, staff is directed to implement that policy. After the policy is implemented, council would work with staff to evaluate the policy and make any amendments that may be required. In practice, policymaking is sometimes less ordinary than what appears on the slide because of various factors. Oftentimes, there is a rapid changing environment and issues facing you could be complex, or it could be difficult to single out problems that require more immediate action. There could be differing and sometimes strongly held views by the stakeholders and members of the public. There could be a lack of time to identify all possible alternatives and to conduct detailed research and analysis. There could be legal and financial implications limiting what council may do, and the implementation of the policy, along with the establishment of monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, may be very complex. So to recap, council is the primary policy-making body of the municipality, while administrative staff is responsible for carrying out the council's policy decisions. The two roles are distinct, but there can be much overlap. Although staff is responsible for implementing a policy, council may wish to develop appropriate reporting mechanisms to help ensure that the policies are being carried out as intended and as effectively as possible, so that council can follow the implementation process, can follow the implementation process. And then the next slide, please. The stewardship role. Council's objectives are to ensure that the municipality's financial and administrative resources are being used as efficiently as possible. There is a fine line between a councillor's overall stewardship and the municipality and the administration's management of the day-to-day activities. Generally, council monitors the implementation of its approved policies and programs, but the practical aspects of its implementation and administration are the staff's responsibility. Essentially, the day-to-day operations of the municipality are left up to the staff. To be effective at the stewardship role, council may wish to have processes in place to help ensure that policies adapted by council are being implemented, staff are administering services and programs as council intended, rules and regulations are being applied correctly and consistently, and funds are being spent only as authorized, and the municipality's resources, financial and otherwise, are being used appropriately and as efficiently as possible. Establishing and following such policies and guidelines helps council leave the day-to-day details for the staff to manage. Council is then free to deal with exceptional situations, ensure that policies are current, and listen to the issues raised by the public to represent the broader community interest. Before council can monitor and measure the municipality's administrative effectiveness and efficiency, it may wish to become familiar with the policies currently in place. With input from municipal staff, council can determine whether the policies are functioning well or if changes are necessary. I'm now going to pass it back over to Caitlin.
Thank you. Accountability and transparency. Ontario municipalities and members of council operate under a legislated accountability and transparency framework that include rules for the municipality and rules for members of council and local boards. Ensuring accountability and transparency is one of council's roles under Section 224 of the Municipal Act and is a priority in maintaining public trust. Councillors are, of course, accountable to the public as elected officials. However, it is also important that procedures and policies are clearly set out and accessible, and that the day-to-day operations of the municipality are transparent. This slide outlines policies that council are required to adopt. Next slide, please. Thank you. Codes of conduct. So codes of conduct are usually code of conduct usually set out expectations and standards for councillors' conduct. Codes may help prevent ethical conflicts and help in their resolution, serve as a basis for council orientation and training, and serve as a reference throughout the operation of the council's term. With the growing importance of accountability and transparency, more municipalities have adopted codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards. Some have also adopted other procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of those members. Municipalities are required to establish codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards, which must include certain subject matters. These would include gifts, benefits, and hospitality, respectful conduct including towards officers and employees of the municipality or of local boards, confidential information, and lastly, use of municipal or local board property and equipment. Next slide, please. Accountability officers. Municipalities are required to provide access to an integrity commissioner. An integrity commissioner operates independent of council and reports to council with respect to the application of the code of conduct of members of council and local boards. Procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of members of council and local board. The IC, the Integrity Commissioner, functions may also include providing advice and education about the code and other ethical rules to members of council and the public, as well as conducting inquiries into requests from council or a local board, a member of council or a board, or a member of the public about whether a member of council or local board has contravened the applicable code of conduct. If the IC reports that, in their opinion, a member of council has contravened the code of conduct, the municipality may impose a penalty in the form of a reprimand or a suspension of pay for a period of up to 90 days. It's up to the municipality to decide how to proceed after the IC's report. To help ensure integrity and accountability in public office, the Municipal Act provides municipalities with authority to appoint certain integrity and accountability type officers. These would include municipal ombudsman. This officer's function is to investigate in independent manner decisions and recommendations made and actions done or omitted in the course of the administration of the municipality, local boards, or certain municipal corporations as the municipality specifies. This is a separate office from the Ontario Ombudsman, who also has a role with respect to municipalities. The Auditor General, who may assist council in holding itself and municipal administrators accountable for the quality of stewardship over public funds and achieving value for money in municipal operations. The Auditor General must also perform his or her duties in an independent manner. The Auditor General's responsibilities do not include the responsibilities of the municipal auditor. Lastly, municipalities may, if they wish, appoint a lobbyist registry and registrar and registration system, such as establishing a code of conduct for lobbyists and prohibiting former public office holders from lobbying for a specified time period. Next slide, please. The Ontario Ombudsman has had a role with respect to municipalities. This role builds on local accountability and transparency framework in the Municipal Act. This role is in addition to the Ontario Ombudsman role as the default meeting investigator for municipalities that have not appointed a local meeting investigator. The Ontario Ombudsman supports transparency in government and may recommend improvements. The Ontario Ombudsman may investigate municipalities when a complaint is received or on the Ombudsman's own initiative. Although the Ontario Ombudsman may investigate, they cannot compel municipalities to take action. The Ombudsman may make recommendations to council and the municipality as part of their report. It is up to the municipality whether and how to address any recommendations made by the Ombudsman. It is up to the Ombudsman on how to respond to complaints. For example, the Ontario Ombudsman's practice is to investigate complaints made to local integrity officers, for example, a local ombudsman, only after the local complaint processes are completed. The Ontario Ombudsman does not replace locally established complaint mechanisms or act as an integrity commissioner for municipalities. Local integrity officers and municipal codes of conduct are an important part of Ontario's local accountability framework. For more information on the Ontario Ombudsman, including its processes, please see the Ombudsman Act and the Ontario Ombudsman website. Next slide, please. Thank you. Privacy and confidentiality. Personal privacy and other confidentiality issues are an important practical and legal consideration for municipal councilors and staff. The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act is the primary statute for privacy and confidentiality. It sets out rules for collection, use, and disclosure of personal information. According to these rules, councilors and staff in most circumstances protect personal privacy and only collect, use, and disclose personal information in accordance with those rules. For example, depending on circumstances, councilors and staff may or may not be authorized to obtain personal information in the course of their duties. This might mean that at times councilors could not obtain this kind of information from staff. Municipal freedom of information legislation also requires confidential information of other kinds, in addition to personal information. Other laws, including local bylaws, also regulate personal and other kinds of confidential information. Councilors who may have received personal or other confidential information in the course of their duties will have related responsibilities, such as protecting and safeguarding the information. Counselors may wish to check with municipal staff about appropriate measures and the municipality's practices. Next slide, please. The role of the school board trustee. School trustees are members of the school board. They are locally elected representatives of the public, and they are the community's advocate for public education. Only the board, not an individual trustee, has the authority to make decisions or take action. A trustee is often the first point of contact for parents and community members who have questions and or concerns about their local school. Candidates should contact the applicable school board for further information about their duties and commitments. Next slide, please. Role of the school board trustee continued. So the role of the school board trustee is to establish policy direction, participate in making decisions that benefit the entire school board while representing the interests of constituents. School board trustees are accountable to constituents, the Ministry of Education, and families. Next slide, please. Municipal office eligibility and ineligibility. You must be an eligible elector, which means you must be able to vote. So the list above is a list that shows voter eligibility as well as ineligibility to run and hold office. You can only be nominated if, as of the day you are nominated, you are qualified to hold that office under the Act and are not ineligible under the Municipal Elections Act or any other act or otherwise prohibited by law to be nominated or to hold the office. Please note that the municipal clerk is responsible for setting up and running the voting places used in a municipal election. The clerk must comply with any provincial or local public health measures that are in effect and may also put in place additional procedures that they consider necessary for conducting the election. If you have questions about public health and safety at the polling place, you should contact your municipal clerk. Next slide, please. Thank you. School board trustee eligibility and ineligibility. Questions about school board eligibility should be directed to the school board secretary. Please refer to this chart to see the eligibility and ineligibility or refer to the Education Act. Now it's Jennifer's turn again.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear
Can
me?
you go back now?
We'll go back.
Oh, you couldn't hear me?
No, I saw something in the chat.
Oh, no, sorry. Sorry, we'll go back to
Third-party
third-party advertising. Yeah, assistant. So a third-party advertiser is an individual, corporation, or trade union that is registered in the municipality to promote, support, or oppose a candidate or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. A third-party advertisement means an advertisement in any broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that has the purpose of promoting, supporting, or opposing a candidate or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. Next slide, please. I'm on the next slide. Please. Yeah. The only following persons and entities are eligible to file a notice of registration: an individual who is normally a resident in Ontario, a corporation that carries on business in Ontario, and a trade union that holds bargaining rights for employees in Ontario. Ineligibility. So this slide also shows a list of ineligible candidates for third-party advertisers. So in concerning item number 5, any group or organization that is not a corporation. This includes groups like associations or clubs that are not incorporated. Next slide, please. The nomination process. So the first day for filing nominations was May 1st, 2022. The last day and time for following nominations for the 2022 elections is Friday, August 19th, 2022 by 2 p.m. For clarification, the nomination filing fee is only refunded once the candidate submits a completed financial disclosure of all financial transactions made up to the date the nomination was withdrawn. Nomination day. Nomination day for a regular election is the fourth Friday in August in the year of the election. So this would be August 19th, 2022. For withdrawal of a nomination, the local election policy may state a candidate must personally attend the clerk's office to withdraw candidacy. If a candidate is in the hospital or incapacitated, this may not be feasible. If a candidate withdraws a nomination, they are still required to file a campaign financial statement covering all of the financial transactions made in the campaign. If they have not spent any money nor raised any funds, then they click on the box and sign the form and it is complete. If a nomination is withdrawn, the candidate is entitled to a refund of their nomination filing fee only after they file their financial auditor statements by the required deadline. An issue that is raised infrequently, but is of importance nonetheless, is what happens to a campaign which has been opened and a candidate decides to run for a different office. In the candidate's guide, the ministry has provided a few examples showing what happens when candidates change their minds about which office to run for after they've filed their nomination papers. Next slide, please. So starting on May 1st until the close of business day on August 19th, nominations can be submitted to the clerk from anyone who meets the eligibility criteria to run for the office. If May 1st, it's over, but so if May 1st runs on a Sunday, you may not be able to file your registration until the following day when the clerk's office is open. Candidates must complete Form 1, which is the nomination paper, and submit it to the clerk along with the applicable nomination filing fee. The filing fee is $200 for anyone running for the head of council and $100 for all other offices. The clerk must be satisfied that you are eligible to run in order to certify your nomination. The clerk can ask you to show identification or fill out additional form to prove that you are eligible to run for that particular office. The nomination form must have an original signature. If your nomination is not certified by the clerk, your name will not appear on the ballot. And if there's a ward system, as long as you are eligible to vote in the municipality, you may run in any ward. If you do not run in a ward where you do not live, you will not be able to vote for yourself, as you must vote in the ward in which you reside. And please note that in addition to the legislative requirements, each municipal clerk may establish their own local processes and procedures relating to submitting a nomination. So it's important to contact the clerk so you can understand the process in that municipality. Next slide, please. The municipal council candidates are required to obtain 25 nomination signatures on Form 2. Ontario Regulation 101/97 provides an exemption to this requirement for candidates in municipalities with less than 4,000 electors. So please note the requirement for nominators to sign nomination form does not apply to school board candidates. Nominators can nominate more than one candidate and are not required to vote for that candidate. Nominators must meet the eligibility requirements of a municipal elector at the time they sign the nomination form. In a ward system, the nominator can be anyone who is eligible to vote in the municipality, not just the ward. Both the clerk and the candidate are entitled to rely upon the information provided by the nominator. If the nominator did not meet the eligibility requirements when they signed the document, then they could not be held accountable under the penalty section of the municipal. They could be, I don't know if I said that properly. They could be held accountable under the penalty section of the Municipal Elections Act. So, and just a tip, if the candidates wish, they can provide more than 25 signatures. If they are required to obtain the 25 original signatures endorsing their nomination where applicable, and to keep those until after the next regular election. Next slide, please. So occasionally a candidate changes their mind and decides to run for a different office. You can run for only one office at a time. If a candidate files a second nomination, the first nomination is deemed to be withdrawn. If a candidate decides to run for another office and they have already collected the 25 endorsement signatures, they can use these endorsements for the other office. If a candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board and both positions are elected at large, everything from the first campaign is transferred to the second campaign and only one financial statement needs to be filed. Unless the candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board and one or both offices is or are elected by award, the two campaigns must then be kept separate and two financial statements must be filed. Next slide, please. Registration of third-party advertisers. So individuals, corporations, and trade unions may register to be third-party advertisers. There is no registration fee for third-party advertisers. A third-party advertiser would register with the clerk at the local municipality as per section 88.6, section 1. An individual, corporation, or trade union may, in person or by an agent, file with the clerk of the municipality responsible for conducting an election, a notice of registration to be registered as a third party for the election, and the notice must be filed in the prescribed form and must include a declaration of qualifications signed by the individual or by a representative of the corporation or trade union, as the case may be. And it also notes that a notice of registration may only be filed with the clerk of a local municipality. So once registered, they may advertise in support of or opposition to any candidate being elected by voters in the municipality. This would include council, trustees, and directly elected upper tier candidates. To advertise regarding questions on the ballot will require registration as a third-party advertiser. For a regular election, the registration cannot be filed earlier than the first day for filing nominations and cannot be filed later than the Friday before voting day during the clerk's regular business hours. Section 88.6, section 3 notes that once the clerk certifies the notice of registration, the individual, corporation, or trade union is a registered third party for the election. If an individual wants to influence voters in more than one municipality, for example, over the 3 municipalities covered in a specific school board trustee election, he or she would have to register in each of the 3 municipalities and conduct their activities as 3 separate campaigns. If the municipality is satisfied that there has been a contravention of the act, then it can ask the third-party advertiser to remove the advertisement or discontinue the advertising. You can refer to section 88.7 for more information. Next slide, please. Oh, that's third-party advertiser withdrawal. Yeah. The third-party advertiser's registration is deemed to be withdrawn if they file a nomination. This means that their advertising campaign would automatically end when they file their nomination. If a corporation or trade union is registered as a third-party advertiser, it would not be affected by the person filing a nomination, as the person would not be the same entity. A third-party advertiser and a candidate would need to be careful to distance their activities, as third-party advertising may not take place under the direction of a candidate. The existing campaign finance rules would not change. Finances relating to a third-party advertising campaign cannot be transferred to a candidate's campaign, or a third-party advertiser who withdraws and closes their campaign cannot transfer that campaign to someone else. To maintain financial transparency around third-party advertising campaigns, the financial statements of advertisers who end their campaign early should reflect their finances as of the day their campaign ended. The registration period for third-party advertisers run until the Friday before voting day, which is October 21st, or the last day of the clerk's office is open before voting day if in a by-election. I'm going to pass it back over to Caitlin.
I'm back again. Contributions. Campaign account, so just letting everyone know, these next few slides are actually quite important, and it's the questions that the ministry gets asked a lot with respect to contributions. So campaign accounts are only required if the candidate or third-party advertiser raises or spends money. So for acclamations and campaigns where no funds are raised or spent, there's no need for a campaign account. So trade unions and corporations are not eligible to contribute to a candidate's campaigns, although they can participate in the election as third-party advertisers or make contributions to third-party advertising campaigns. Third-party advertisers will generally need to follow the same rules for raising campaign funds and financial reporting as candidates for office. Municipalities must establish rules and procedures regarding the use of municipal or local board resources during the campaign period. This must be passed by May 1st in the year of the election. This will encourage accountability and transparency, so ensure that you are aware of the municipality's policy in this regard. The practice of municipalities of providing candidate contact information on their website is not a contribution. Generally, the same contribution rules will apply to third-party advertiser campaigns as to candidates. Refer to both when the rules applies to both. Next slide, please. Contributions part 2. So contributions from the candidate and their spouse are considered to have come from the same person and count against the self-contribution limit. The rules for determining whether corporations are considered to be one contributor are clarified. If one corporation controls the other directly or indirectly, then they are considered to be the same contributor. If the corporations are owned or controlled by the same person or groups of persons, either directly or indirectly, they are considered to be the same contributor. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, these next few bullets, we get asked this question almost every single time with respect to volunteers. So the volunteers, the value of services provided by volunteers is generally not considered to be a contribution. If a professional such as an accountant or a lawyer volunteers to provide services for which they would normally be paid, the market value of the service must be recorded as a contribution by the volunteer and is a campaign expense. As mentioned previously, only third-party advertisers can accept contributions from corporations and unions. There is no rule that a candidate, family member, or campaign staff cannot contribute to a third-party advertiser. However, it is a potential optics issue. Next slide, please. Contributions part 4. So campaign contributions are monies, goods, or services given to a candidate for his or her election campaign. Cash contributions may only be accepted up to $25. Contributions more than $25 must be made by check, money order, or by a method that clearly shows where the funds came from. So for example, we got asked recently, like, oh, can I use email transfer? As long as you can show proof that that email transfer came from somebody, you can do email transfer. Fundraising functions are events or activities held by or on behalf of a candidate for the primary purpose of raising money for the candidate's campaign. The price of admission to a fundraising function is a campaign contribution, and a receipt must be issued for the full amount. Receipts must be issued for every contribution and should contain the name, the address of the contributor, and the amount and the date. Next slide, please. Thank you. Contribution limits. So the limit on contributions to any one candidate or registered third-party advertiser is $1,200. The individual contribution amount has increased from $750 to $1,200, but the aggregate amount of $5,000 stays the same. Since candidates and third-party advertisers are required to inform contributors of contribution limits, you may want to include the limits on the receipts provided to the contributors. Next slide, please. Self-funding limits. So self-funding limit for municipal council candidates based on the number of electors voting for the office to a maximum of $25,000 per candidate. The formula for calculating the limit is $7,500 plus 20 cents per elector for head of council and $5,000 plus 20 cents per elector for other council offices. The highest self-funding limit that anyone could possibly have is $25,000. If the formula works out to a number that is over $25,000, they still get the $25,000 limit. If the formula works out to less than $25,000, then they get whatever the formula works out to. There is no self-funding limits for school board candidates or third-party advertisers. Next slide, please. Thank you. Borrowing. While candidates can open their campaign account with their own funds, the candidate cannot loan funds to his or her campaign to kickstart it with the intention of getting it all back. The only way that a candidate can reclaim this startup amount is after the election campaign period ends and prior to filing the financial statement. The candidate or his or her spouse may be refunded any contributions from surplus. You can't receive a loan from family members or from any corporate accounts that you have access to. The loan isn't considered to be a campaign income, and paying it back is not a campaign expense. But if you or your spouse guarantee the loan and the campaign does not repay it, all of it, the remaining balance is considered to be a contribution, since the guarantor is basically providing the campaign the means to repay the loan. Keep in mind the contribution limit for the candidate and spouse if borrowing. Any interest that the campaign pays on the loan is a campaign expense. Next slide, please. Campaign expenses. The replacement value of goods retained by the person, individual, corporation, or trade union from any previous election in the municipality and is used in the current election, such as the value of contributions of goods and services, audit and accounting fees, interest on loans under section 88.17, the cost of holding fundraising functions, the cost of holding parties and making other expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. For a candidate, expenses relating to a recount or proceeding under section 83, expenses related to a compliance audit, expenses that are incurred by a candidate with a disability or a registered third-party advertiser who is an individual with a disability are directly related to the disability and would not have been incurred but for the election to which the expenses relate. The cost of election campaign advertisements within the meaning of section 88.3 or third-party advertisements as the case may be. For greater certainty, the cost of holding fundraising functions does not include costs related to events, activities that are organized for such purposes as promoting public awareness of a candidate, and at which the soliciting of contributions is incidental, or promotional materials in which the soliciting of contributions is incidental. In the following circumstances, a campaign, next slide, please. Thank you. Campaign expenses continued. Candidates and third-party advertisers should become familiar with campaign expense provisions. Campaign expenses are those costs incurred by the candidate or on the candidate's behalf during his or her campaign or by third-party advertisers during their campaign. The nomination fee is no longer an expense and is not included on the financial disclosure form. Goods and services donated to the campaign are also expenses and must be reported. A receipt must be provided for fair market value. Only nominated persons and or third-party advertisers can incur expenses during their campaign period. Payment of any campaign expenses must be drawn from the campaign account, and a receipt providing the details and proof of payment must be obtained. All expenses must be reported in the relevant financial disclosure form to be filled by the clerk to be filled with the clerk by the candidate or the third party advertiser. With respect to campaign inventory, if you ran in the last election and you want to use leftover goods such as signs or other office supplies, you have to determine what the current market value for those goods is and what it would cost if you were to purchase them today. These amounts are recorded as an expense. If you end up with leftover inventory at the end of this campaign, and it becomes your personal property, but if you want to store them to use in another election, any costs for storage are not considered campaign expenses. Now I'll hand it back over to Jennifer to continue.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Spending limits. So the spending limit formula for candidates and the maximum amount for parties after voting day are set out in Ontario Regulation 101/97. The clerk calculates the spending limits twice. Upon the candidates filing the nomination form, the clerk shall calculate the spending limit based on the number of electors on the voters list as it existed on September 15th, 2018. The second calculation is based on the number of electors on the voters list as it exists on September 15th, 2022. Note that this calculation must be provided to candidates on or before September 25th, 2022. Whichever number is higher is the spending limit and the clerk's calculation is final. Next slide, please. Clerks will continue to provide estimates of the spending limits. Candidates will be required to inform their contributors of the contribution limits, i.e. how much a contributor can contribute to an individual candidate's campaign and the aggregate limit on the contributions to any one council or local board election. The spending limit is to be provided by September 25th. And if the third-party advertiser has registered in more than one municipality, each registration is a separate campaign with its own spending limits. The campaign finance rules are generally the same for third-party advertisers as they are for candidates. Example given that they're subject to the same contribution limits and have the same and have calculated spending limits. This includes financial filing requirements, requests for extensions, and records. The third-party advertisers are also required to ensure contributions and expenses are tracked and accounted for, proper record retention, proper direction is provided to those incurring expenses or accepting contributions on their behalf, and that spending limits are adhered to. Next slide, please. Expenses not subject to the spending limit. So most expenses are subject to the spending limit. Those listed in this slide are not. Expenses related to fundraising functions are exempt from the campaign spending limit, but in order to qualify as fundraising function, the event must have the raising of money as its primary purpose. Campaign events at which incidental fundraising takes place do not qualify as fundraising functions. Similarly, a brochure promoting awareness of a candidate that contains contact information, how to make a campaign contribution doesn't qualify as a fundraising function. Expenses that were subject to the spending limit if incurred before voting day are not subject to the spending limit if incurred after voting day. Next slide, please. Third-party advertisers will be subject to two spending limits, the general spending limit and a separate spending limit for expenses related to parties and expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. Ontario Regulation 101/97 provides the following formula for calculating third-party spending limits. So it's $5,000 plus 5 cents per elector to a maximum of $25,000. The formula used is based on the number of electors entitled to vote in an election in the municipality. The Municipal Elections Act also provides that the spending limit for parties and other expressions of appreciation after voting day be set at 10% of the general spending limit. This would be consistent with the spending limit in place for candidates. Next slide, please. As a candidate or third-party advertiser, it is important that you be fully aware of the responsibilities regarding election spending and accepting campaign contributions. A question we are asked each municipal election is whether there is a requirement for every candidate to have a chief financial officer, and the answer is no. Suggest that you familiarize yourself with sections 88.8 to 88.21 of the Municipal Elections Act, and also the financial statements that you will be required to file. This will help guide you in organizing your records and how they have to be reported. You are required under the Municipal Elections Act to keep accurate records and open a campaign bank account if you are spending any money or accepting any contributions. And please note that the bank account is not required if the candidate or third-party advertiser does not receive nor spend any money. Next slide, please. Candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep complete and accurate financial statements during the course of their campaigns. All contributions and expenses are to be accounted for and disclosed by the candidate on the relevant prescribed financial form. All candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep all campaign records until after November 15th, 2026, when a new council will take office. These rules apply whether you are elected or not. Next slide, please. So store receipts in a secure place as they are valuable documents. Receipts must be signed by the candidate and or by his or her designate. It is a good practice to have a receipt that is multi-part form, one for the contributor and one or more for the candidate's records. Receipts should be sequentially marked and numbered, I should say. Open a bank account which provides monthly statements and canceled checks. Produce duplicate deposit slips for every deposit, listing the name of the contributors and the amounts received from each one. Maintain a petty cash fund to handle minor expenses and obtain invoices to support all payments from that fund. At any time, the cash on hand plus the total amount of invoices should equal the original amount of the petty cash fund. The fund can be replenished periodically by a check drawn on the campaign account in the amount equal to the total amount of the invoices. Candidates and third-party advertisers may find it useful to look over Form 4 for the candidates or Form 8 for third-party advertisers, respectively, at the beginning of their campaign to give them an idea of what information will be needed to report on at the end of their campaign. It is a requirement under the Municipal Elections Act to maintain those records until November 15th, 2023. Next slide, please. The period for third-party advertisements, as shown on the slide, is the period when the rules for third-party advertisers applies. In 2022, that is from May 1st, 2022 until the close of voting at 8 p.m. on October 24th, 2022. So please note that third-party advertisers and candidates are required to identify themselves on signs and advertisements. The Municipal Elections Act references so for more information, you can reference candidates at 88.3, and for third-party advertisers, it's 88.4. Next slide, please. The broadcaster or publisher of a third-party or candidate advertisement shall maintain records containing the following information for a period of 4 years after the date the advertisement appears and shall permit the public to inspect the records during normal business hours. So it needs to contain the name of the candidate or the registered third-party advertiser, the name, business address, and telephone number of the individual who deals with the broadcaster or publisher under the direction of the candidate or registered third-party advertiser, and a copy of the advertisement or the means of reproducing it for inspection. And finally, a statement of the charge made, a statement of the charge made for its appearance. Now I'm going to pass it back over to Caitlin.
Thank you. It's my second last time, guys, so don't worry. We're wrapping up soon. So financial statements. Section 88.25 of the Municipal Elections Act. All candidates are required to file Form 4 with the clerk, regardless of how much or how little they spent or fundraised. If you file the nomination form, you must file a Form 4. This form is required even if you withdrew your nomination or were acclaimed. If you are registered as a third-party advertiser, you must complete Form 8. A candidate may resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the filing deadline. The clerk is required to make public a report of which candidates filed financial statements and which did not. Next slide, please. Thank you. Financial statements, part 2. The appointment of an auditor by the candidate is mandatory if expenses or contributions exceed $10,000. The auditor must be licensed under the Public Accounting Act, and please note that campaign statements are public documents. Next slide, please. Financial statements, part 3. Candidates can file their financial documents at any time after voting day to January 3rd, adjusted from December 31st as it falls on a Saturday. Filing the financial statement ends the campaign period. This will make it easier for acclamations and campaigns where little or no expense is incurred. Clerks will be required to report whether candidates have met their financial filing obligation and publish that report on the municipal website or in another electronic form. This needs to be done by April 30th. April 30th in the case of a regular election, or with 90 days of a by-election. Next slide, please. Part 4 of financial statements. The nomination fee is only refundable if the financial statement is filed on time. A candidate or third-party advertiser who misses the filing deadline may file within the 30 days grace period, provided a $500 late filing fee is paid to the municipality. Please note, a candidate who chooses to file within the 30-day grace period will be subject to both the $500 late filing fee as well as the loss of their nomination refund. A candidate or third-party advertiser may resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the filing deadline. Next slide, please. So again, this slide is one that we get asked a lot of questions about with respect to surplus. So when filing the financial statement, a candidate or third-party advertiser with a campaign surplus must pay the entire amount to the clerk. Prior to paying over any surplus funds to the clerk, a candidate or third-party advertiser is entitled to a refund of any contributions they or their spouse, if an individual, made to the campaign and not to anyone else. So the amount that they may be refunded is lesser of the amount of the relevant contribution or the amount of the surplus. The clerk is required to place surplus monies in trust for use by the candidate if they need it for a compliance audit. The clerk is required to place surplus monies in trust for use by the third-party advertiser if they need it for a compliance audit. If neither the candidate nor the third-party advertiser requires the funds for these purposes, it becomes the property of the municipality or school board. I'll hand it over to Jennifer, then I'll finish it off.
Thanks, Caitlin. We'll talk about the compliance audit. So every council and school board must establish a compliance audit committee. Members of a compliance audit committee cannot be members of the council or school board, an employee, a candidate in the election, or a registered third-party advertiser. Clerks are to review contributions and to prepare a report for consideration by the compliance audit committee if a contributor appears to have exceeded any contribution limits. This process is related to reviewing contributions as reported on the financial statement and is not connected to the compliance audit process. If it is apparent to the clerk that a contributor has exceeded one or more of the contribution limits, the clerk would report this to the committee, which would meet to determine whether to proceed with legal action. The legislation does not specify what details are to be provided in the report to the committee. Electors entitled to vote in an election may apply for a compliance audit even if the candidate has not filed a financial statement. The application must be in writing and set out the electors' reasons for why they believe the Municipal Elections Act has been contravened. The application must be submitted to the municipal clerk or the secretary of the school board within 90 days of the filing deadline. Next slide, please. The Compliance Audit Committee is required to provide a brief brief written reasons for its decision. The Compliance Audit Committee meetings are required to be open to the public, but the committee may deliberate in private. Electors can apply for a compliance audit of a third-party advertiser's campaign finances. The minister has the authority to make a regulation setting out qualifications for compliance audit committee members. And subsection 88.33, subsection 8, the written reasons for the committee's decisions shall be given to the candidate, the clerk with whom the candidate filed his or her nomination, the secretary of the local school board, if applicable, and the applicant. If the audit occurs, the report must be circulated to these same individuals. The Compliance Audit Committee considers the auditor's report, and if the Compliance Audit determines that there has been an apparent contravention of the Municipal Elections Act, the committee will decide whether to proceed with legal action. Decisions of the committee may be appealed to the Superior Court of Justice. A person who believes that a candidate has contravened the Municipal Elections Act may proceed with legal actions without having first obtained a compliance audit. Next slide, please. We'll talk about the offenses. So section 90, subsection 2, an offense described in subsection 3 constitutes a corrupt practice, and a person who commits it is, on conviction, disqualified from voting in an election until the next regular election has taken place after the election to which the offense relates, in addition to being liable to any other penalty provided in the act. The next subsection 3, no person shall directly or indirectly offer, give, lend, or promise, or agree to give or lend any valuable consideration in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. They cannot advance, pay, or cause to be paid money intending that it be used to commit an offense referred to in clause A, or knowing that it will be used to repay money used in that way. Or give, procure, or promise, or agree to procure an office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. Apply for, accept, or agree to accept any valuable consideration of office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. And the last, to give, procure, or promise, or agree to procure an office or employment to induce a person to become a candidate, refrain from becoming a candidate, or withdrawing his or her candidacy. So the penalties, next slide, please. We can refer to this chart, which provides the penalties for individuals, candidates, and third-party advertisers. Ineligibility to vote is a penalty if you are convicted of a corrupt practice. For more information, please see the Municipal Act in section 90. Next slide, please. So the voters list. So the primary list of electors, as corrected by the clerk, becomes the voters list on September 1st, 2022. The clerk determines how and when individuals can apply to have their names and information corrected or added to or removed from the voters list. The clerk can also remove a name from the list if the clerk becomes aware that that person has died. Section 23 states that the clerk shall not provide a copy of the voters list under subsection 3 or part of the voters list under subsection 4 until September 1st. Next slide, please. Candidates running in a ward are entitled only to that portion of the list that contains the names of the electors entitled to vote for that office. And then next section, please, or next slide, I guess. The clerk may require anyone who receives a copy of the list to sign a receipt, acknowledging that the list is only to be used for election purposes and any other use would be in violation of the Municipal Elections Act. An elector's name shall appear only once on the list, and in a ward system, an elector is entitled to vote only in the ward where he or she resides. And I'm going to pass it back to Caitlin.
I'm going to finish it off, guys. Next slide, please. Voting proxy. There are a number of reasons why someone would appoint someone else to vote on their behalf, including absence from the area, illness, or etc. So please refer to section 44 in the Municipal Elections Act for more information on proxy forms. So for example, reasons why proxy voting would be necessary. No appointments until all nominations are closed. Clerks must designate a place and time for presentation of proxy voting application and appointment forms for clerk's certification. On days of advance vote, the clerk's office or another location may be designated and open from noon to 5 p.m. Assignment of proxy vote is the responsibility of an eligible voter to appoint an identified eligible voter. Eligible proxy. So may exercise only one proxy vote unless the proxy is acting on behalf of a spouse, sibling, parent, child, or grandparent or grandchild in sections 44, subsection 2 and 3. Proxy forms must have original signatures. Please check with the municipal clerk if proxy voting is available, as municipalities that use alternative voting may not permit proxy voting. Next slide, please. Thank you. Scrutineers. So only a candidate may appoint scrutineers to represent him or her during the voting and the counting of votes, including during a recount. Third-party advertisers cannot appoint scrutineers. In the traditional election where voting takes place at the poll, the deputy returning officer, DRO, is in charge of the activity in the voting place, and the DRO may ask the scrutineer to leave if the scrutineer is not complying with the legislation. Candidates and scrutineers should respect the DRO, must ensure fairness, access, privacy, and security of the vote. There is no age restrictions for scrutineers. Next slide, please. Thank you. Recounts. A recount is automatic if the vote is tied. Council and school boards have the option of establishing policies prior to the election that also allow for an automatic recount. Council still retains the option to pass a resolution for a recount within 30 days after the clerk has declared the results of the election. An eligible elector can apply to the courts for a recount within 30 days of the clerk's declaration of the results. Next slide, please. Key dates. So voting day is on October 24, 2022 between 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. unless reduced hours are set out in a bylaw for retirement homes and institutions, or council has passed a bylaw to open voting earlier than 10 a.m. in sections 46 of the Municipal Elections Act. The campaign period, the time when a candidate can accept contributions and incur election expenses, runs from the date the nomination is submitted up until January 3rd of 2023. The campaign period, the time the third-party advertiser can incur expenses, begins on the date their registration is certified until January 3rd of 2023. The deadline for the filing of the campaign financial statement in the clerk's office is Friday, 31st, 2023, no later than 10 p.m. All candidates and third-party advertisers must file this statement regardless of how much they spent or received in contributions. I thought I said March 31st. Okay, I lied. So Friday, March 31st of 2023. Apparently I can't speak. Sorry, everyone. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these are resources. The first link will take you to the ELAW's website where all provincial legislation is available online, including the associated regulations. You want to be familiar with the Municipal Elections Act, the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflicts of Interest Act. If running for a school board, the Education Act. The second link is the link to the Municipal Affairs and Housing website. From this site, you'll be able to access the 2022 voter, candidate, and third-party advertisers guides. The third link is for the Municipal World website. If you click on the icon bookshop, it illustrates a list of books that are related to running for municipal office. They are available to purchase online. Next slide. Thank you. So this concludes our presentation. I guess I didn't update that information. I thought I did, but my computer's been wonky. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I'm the municipal advisor, not Jane. It is me. So I will send Jana an updated copy. So my information is Caitlin, CAITLIN, period, REDDICK at ontario.ca. Again, my name is Caitlin Reddick. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate that you have an interest in your community, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
If we have any questions, I'd like you guys to use the raise your hand feature in the on Zoom, and I can allow you to talk and ask any questions that you have. Not yet. There is none on the chat there, or you could enter them on the chat if you wish. Oh, we do have someone who'd like to speak and ask a question. So go ahead.
Yeah,
Lee?
I'm just wondering, it's Leah. I'm just wondering, is there anything that helps with advice for starting the bank account? Because it's kind of an unusual account, I think.
Did you have any? I don't really think that, as long as it's like a separate checking account. Some people also, like I've heard, they use their own personal credit card, because a lot of times when you order online, you can't use a debit card, right? So they'll use their personal credit card, but they'll make sure to keep receipts and transfer money from the campaign bank account to that personal credit card to show that they're still using funds within that campaign bank account. Do you have any other comments? Yeah, as long as it's a separate account, that's really all the advice we have.
Because you would only open it and then basically close it as soon as the campaign's over. And once you've filed everything, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, okay. That was what I had a question.
Clearly tracking all the expenses in the account, and that all the money is going in and out of the account, and it's all clearly shown. That's all you really need to do with the bank account.
Mhm.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
No problem.
At this time, there does not appear to be any other questions in any of the other mediums that are watching. So I think we will say goodnight, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and for Caitlin and Jane for attending from the Ministry of, Caitlin and Jen